Hello, and thank you for joining the first webinar in the HCV Landlord Participation Series. We apologize that we were not able to host this event live due to technical difficulties. However, we would like to begin with a message from Deputy Assistant Secretary Danielle Bastarash, who was unable to join us today.
Hello, and thank you for joining HUD's Housing Choice Voucher Landlord Participation webinar. My name is Danielle Bastarash, and I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for HUD's Public Housing and Housing Choice Voucher programs. The Voucher program is the nation's largest rental subsidy program and currently assists more than 2.3 million low-income families. In the Voucher program, participating families rent units on the privately owned rental market, and this means that the Voucher program is largely dependent on owner participation. While many states have established local laws prohibiting discrimination based on source of income, federal law does not require a private market landlord to participate in the Voucher program. HUD has been concerned that with tightening rental markets, it is becoming increasingly difficult for Voucher families to find owners willing to participate in the Voucher program. To better understand this trend and how to reverse it, HUD Secretary Carson established the Voucher Landlord Task Force in spring of 2018. The task force organized listening forums across the country to hear from property owners and managers about the difficulties they experience when participating in the Voucher program. In today's webinar, you will hear about the formation of the Voucher Task Force, recent research on landlord participation in the Voucher program, and the challenges landlords and public housing agencies shared with us during our 2018 outreach and engagement. The task force is still engaging with PHAs and landlords, but the focus of the conversations has shifted from outreach to action. To that end, HUD is developing a series of guidance documents and best practices that are designed to improve landlords' experience with the Housing Choice Voucher program. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the webinar.
Again, welcome to the HCV webinar series. My name is Sarah Fiala, and I'm a project director with First Pick, Inc., a TA provider working with the HCV task force. As Deputy Assistant Secretary Bastarash noted, HUD has been engaged in multiple activities surrounding landlord participation in the HCV program. This is the first of 3 webinars in this series. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping notes. If you have questions during today's webinar, you can submit them to hcv@firstpick.org. This is an overview of what you can expect to hear today. Additionally, let me take a moment to let you know how we are defining landlord for this effort. The term landlord includes rental property owners, managers, assistant managers, real estate brokers who are involved in rental housing, etc. So what we are looking at are those with a direct interest in managing or owning rental property. I would now like to turn things over to Stephen Durham, Director of the Office of Housing Voucher Programs, who will provide an overview of the HCV program.
Thank you, Sarah. So let's talk about HCV. Everybody wants to know, what is the Housing Choice Voucher Program? Well, commonly we call the Housing Choice Voucher Program Section 8. Currently, the program serves 2.3 million households, and we help low-income families find and access affordable housing. It's the largest rental assistance program in the country, and 26% of the households that we serve are elderly. Another 26% are non-elderly people that are disabled, and 43% of the households are comprised of single people. So we try to serve a wide spectrum of the families in America that are in need of housing. We also like to talk about where we are. Where is Section 8? Where can I access it? The program is all over the country. Every state. We're also in U.S. territories in Puerto Rico. We're in Guam as well. And as you can see on the slide, we service not only the inner cities, the suburbs, but also the rural areas. 52% of our voucher holders reside in cities, 38% are in the suburbs, and 10% are in the rural areas. Vouchers are used in single-family homes, duplexes, apartments, shared housing arrangements, and also single-room occupancy units. For the HCV program to run smoothly, when you have a 2.3 million household program, you have to have clearly defined roles. So we'll talk about these roles right now. There's four prongs in the process. We have a landlord role. The landlord's role is to provide safe, decent, sanitary housing and to be a good landlord. Enforce their lease. Provide a safe unit and treat their tenant no different than they would any other tenant in an unassisted unit. The tenant has a responsibility. The tenant's responsibility is to be a good tenant. Comply with the terms of the lease. Comply with the program rules. The PHA has a role. They're the local administrator. The PHA is tasked with enforcing the program locally, setting payment standards, determining client eligibility, performing unit inspections, and also processing payments. HUD has a role. That's where we come in. HUD, we actually fund the program, and we create the overarching rules of the program that the local administrators, the local PHAs, must implement. So that's the four-prong approach to the HCV program. It's all a partnership. We need all parties to do their role. We need all parties to be actively engaged for this program to operate and to run smoothly. Many questions always come up when we talk about the Housing Choice Voucher program or the Section 8 program, where we talk about how do I get paid, what's the contract, how does it affect my lease? Well, there's a standard HAP contract, that's the Housing Assistance Payment Contract, and that contract is between the PHA and the landlord. That contract cannot be modified. It governs the housing assistance payment, and it includes what we call a tenancy addendum, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. The landlord also has a lease with the tenant, standard lease. The landlord can set the provisions of their lease as they would a non-assisted unit. The landlord is expected to enforce their lease as they would to a unit and an unassisted unit as well. The difference between unassisted tenancy and assisted tenancy is that there is a tenancy addendum that is provided by HUD. The tenancy addendum establishes kind of the ground rules for the program. It makes sure that the family reports changes in their family composition, changes in the household to the PHA, requires that there be no subletting. It establishes that there can be no side payments between the tenant and the landlord. It establishes what can be considered grounds for termination for the program. And it also establishes the housing quality standards and an inspection process for participation on the program. Those are the basics. That's the basics of the HAP contract. And once again, the PHA is responsible for delivering the payment to the landlord. The main question everybody asks me when I talk about Section 8 is, how much am I going to get paid? How am I going to get my rent? How do you calculate the rent? And so for us, the rent is considered the gross rent. That's the rent for the unit as well as the utilities. And rent is established by the PHA's payment standards. And the PHA in its locality has the ability to set payment standards based on HUD published fair market rents. Fair market rents are published in the fall of every calendar year, and the PHA has the ability to set their payment standards within 90 to 110% of the fair market rent published by HUD. As you can see, that fair market rent is determined by the 40th percentile of rents for recent movers into that area. That means new leases. The reason that's done is we want to capture the most current market conditions and actual rent amounts for units by specific size in that local area. By doing so, we're able to then determine, is the rent reasonable? And that's a process that everybody always has a lot of questions about. What does that mean? What does rent reasonableness mean? What is a reasonable rent? A rent reasonableness means that an assisted unit, a unit with a HCV voucher, a Section 8 voucher, cannot charge a rent higher than an unassisted unit of comparable size, comparable amenities in the surrounding area. So if you are in an unassisted unit, you can expect to pay a fair market rent, and if you are in an assisted unit, you can expect to pay a rent that is equivalent to that amount. There should not be a difference between the two. The Section 8 program is not designed to allow landlords to charge an excessive amount of rent. Not only do we want to protect the tenant, we want to ensure that we're protecting the market for all landlords out there. So landlords often ask, if the rent is set at the onset of the contract, can I ever increase the rent while I'm on the program, while I have a tenant in my unit? And the answer is yes. You can always request a rent increase, and you're entitled to one increase per year. But once again, that rent increase, that amount must be determined reasonable. It must be evaluated by the local PHA against current market conditions, against units of like size, like amenities, to determine if that rent is acceptable. If it's determined reasonable, the rent increase shall be approved. There are circumstances when a rent increase may not be approved, and sometimes that's based off of limited funding. PHA may not be able to absorb the increased cost, but that will be communicated to you by the local PHA. It's also recommended that if you are seeking a rent increase, that you provide the PHA with 60 days notice. It allows time for processing and allows time to give the 30-day notice to the tenant, and allows the tenant, the PHA, to adjust the tenant's contribution of the rent. When I was talking about rent earlier, we didn't get into how much the tenant pays. The tenant is going to generally pay 30% of their monthly income. The remaining portion will be paid by the housing authority. Why is it important that we share this message with you, and why is it important that we let you know that you'll be able to get comparable rents, that our tenants are of a certain breakdown in terms of single-family homes, disabled? Because we want to let you know that our market is exactly the same as the private market. What we're trying to establish is that we have a great program that needs landlords. What we have found in the last 8 years is that we are losing landlords at a rapid pace. We have lost more than 5 landlords per 100 units on the program in the last 8 years. When extrapolated over 2.3 million households, that number grows and grows. It gets close to 10,000 less landlords on the program in a decade's period of time. So we ask you guys, why do you not participate? We need your participation. Our program is good. Our program pays market rent. There's no need for landlords to be scared to participate on the Section 8 program, the Housing Choice Voucher program. So as Sarah mentioned at her onset in the introduction, we're reaching out to all property owners. We're looking at owners that are not only mom and pops, people that own 1 unit, 2 units. We're also reaching out to business entities that have large-scale real estate portfolios that are looking to have a consistent rental income, a rent stream that they can rely upon, that they have good tenants, and that also has a program that is going to enforce the tenant rules. And so that is why we come to you today to tell you about the greatness of the Housing Choice Voucher program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leah Anderson, who's a management analyst in the Office of Housing Choice Voucher Programs, and also one of the leaders of the Landlord Task Force that was commissioned by Secretary Dr. Ben Carson.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Again, my name's Leah Anderson, and I'm one of the leads on the HCV Landlord Task Force. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the task force, when it was formed, who's in it, and what we've been up to. So Secretary Carson created the task force in 2018 to deal with some of the issues and learn more about some of the issues that Stephen was just describing. So the goals of the task force primarily are to increase the number of landlords participating in the voucher program, and also to increase the satisfaction of the current landlords that are participating in the program. And our mission is very broadly to explore and learn more about the common barriers that landlords experience, and we've been doing this a lot by talking to landlords themselves, and then to develop strategies to address and alleviate those barriers. So who's in this task force? So the task force is composed of a number of staff members and leaders from across the department. This includes folks from the Office of Public and Indian Housing, Policy Development and Research, Innovation, Field Policy Management, and more, as you can see on the slide. So our recent work in the task force on landlord participation, and some of this is before the task force formed or right around the time the task force was forming. In 2018, HUD commissioned a few studies on landlord participation, and my colleague Mina Bhavan is going to talk about that in a moment, so I'm not going to talk any more about that now. And then Secretary Carson, as I just mentioned, he formed the task force. Our first big endeavor as a task force was to host 7 listening forums and 4 focus groups with landlords and 1 focus group with PHAs in 2018. You're going to hear a lot about that today. That's the primary focus of this webinar. And then right now and for the last year, what we've been doing is based on that outreach that we've been doing to landlords and PHAs and then ongoing outreach is looking at how we can improve the landlord's experience with the program. So here's just a quick snapshot of what you'll hear more about later today. So in 2018, again, we formed this task force and we did something very quickly, which is not always common at HUD, the federal government. We, over 2 months, so very quickly, we planned and implemented and facilitated 7 listening forums in 6 regions across the country. We did 4 focus groups as well at some of those forum locations. And we spoke to over 330 landlords, and many PHAs attended those landlord listening forums. And then we also held a focus group with 8 PHAs with one of our industry partners. So you'll hear a lot about this a little later, but there's just a quick snapshot of kind of how the task force got started and jumped in really quickly to our work. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Mina Bhavan in the Office of Policy, Development, and Research.
All right. Hi, everybody. As Leah mentioned, my name is Mina Bhavan. I'm in the Office of Policy Development and Research here at HUD, and a member of the task force as well. As Leah mentioned, the task force was developed after trends in HUD administrative data was showing that there has been a decline in the number of landlords participating in the program over the years, as well as there was some new evidence from new research that showed that there has been a low acceptance of vouchers, as well as some common reasons as to why landlords don't participate in the program. And I will be sharing with you some of the findings from these studies today. The first study was a pilot study of landlord acceptance of housing choice vouchers. And it used pair testing, which is a fair housing enforcement tool commonly that was adapted for research purposes, where 2 people are assigned similar characteristics except for the one being tested. In this study, it was whether the tester had was using a voucher or not. And the testers go out and they apply for the same available unit and basically report the experiences of asking about the available unit. So in this study, it screened over 300,000 rental unit ads and conducted approximately 4,000 pair tests in 5 cities: Philadelphia, Los Angeles, Fort Worth, Newark, New Jersey, and Washington, D.C. And the intent of this study was to answer, do landlords treat HCV landlord holders differently than similar renters? And do landlords' treatment of voucher holders vary by neighborhood type? The study found that many landlords stated that they would not accept a tenant with a voucher. For example, in Fort Worth, 78% of landlords would not accept a voucher. The voucher denial rate was similarly high in Los Angeles and Philadelphia. For cities that had a state or local law that prohibited source of income discrimination against voucher holders at the time of the study, landlords were more likely to accept a voucher. Only 31% in Newark, New Jersey, and 15% of landlords in Washington, D.C. said they would not take a voucher. As mentioned earlier, the study also examined how voucher acceptance varied by neighborhood type, specifically poverty rate, whether neighborhoods with high poverty rate were different from neighborhoods of low poverty. And the study found that voucher denials are more common in low-poverty neighborhoods. And in 4 of the 5 sites, the voucher denial rate was higher in low-poverty neighborhoods, as you can see on the screen. For example, in Philadelphia, the overall voucher denial rate was 67%, but it was 83% in low-poverty neighborhoods. These next 2 studies I'm going to be talking about attempted to answer why there is low landlord participation in the voucher program, as well as identify activities that PHAs are engaging in to try to increase landlord participation in the voucher program. The Urban Landlord Study attempts to understand why landlords do or don't accept vouchers and what they think about the program. The study interviewed 127 landlords and property owners in Baltimore, Cleveland, and Dallas. These markets varied by both in terms of unit type and landlord owner type. In Cleveland, the voucher market was dominated by predominantly smaller rental properties and landlords with fewer units. In the Dallas market, the voucher market, by contrast, were mostly dominated by big companies with larger low-rise apartment complexes. And in Baltimore, this was more of a mix. The study found that common reasons for landlords participating in the program were financially related and included that the voucher rental payments was a guaranteed income stream, with 56% of the respondents reporting that. There were also some landlords that participated in the program having the belief that voucher tenants were comparable, if not better, than other tenants, and as well as having a desire to help people. Motivations for not participating in the program included frustrations with the inspection process, which at 51%, dealing with paperwork and the bureaucracy of dealing with the program at 41% of responses, and as well as lack of support from the PHA at 41%, mainly with help in dealing with problem tenants. This last study, landlord participation study, got the perspective of PHA staff. They interviewed PHA staff, to provide insights as to why landlords decided whether to participate in the program or not, as well as to identify promising practices that PHAs have used to try to increase landlord participation. Similar to the other findings, financial reasons were the most common factor identified by PHA staff as influencing landlord participation. These including setting voucher rental payment standards that are competitive with the market rents, which Stephen talked about earlier, as well as covering unit damage repair costs. Some activities that PHAs are currently engaged in to try to increase landlord participation include increased voucher rental payment standards, landlord signing bonuses to recruit new landlords, streamlining inspection processes that are very timely for landlords, having security deposits to cover damaged unit costs, PHA landlord liaisons, which are PHA points of contact for landlords when they are dealing with issues, say with tenants, that they have somebody to call and help out, as well as landlord online portals that improve landlord PHA communications as well as business efficiency. The next webinar that we're going to be having will focus on some of these best PHA practices. And if you're interested in learning more about any of these studies, they can be found on HUD's new landlord resource website. Now I'm going to be turning it over to Sarah, who will be telling you about findings from the landlord listening forums, which will echo some of these same findings.
Great, thank you very much, Mina. As previously mentioned, the task force conducted 7 landlord listening sessions nationwide in September and October of 2018. One of the main goals of these sessions was to hear directly from landlords about the challenges they experience when they participate in the HCV program. HUD also gathered input from landlords and incentives and reasons they participate in the program, as well as efforts and activities to recruit and retain landlords. And at 4 of the locations, HUD also hosted smaller, more intensive focus groups where we discussed the same topics in a smaller setting and in a bit greater detail. We will go through each of the forums in a bit more depth, but first I'd like to tell you a little bit about how the task force selected the locations for the forums. 7 locations were selected to host landlord listing forums. The task force analyzed location, market conditions, resources, and other factors. They aim for a range throughout the country and a mix of both urban and rural locations. The task force also looked at different rental housing markets and housing markets overall, vacancy rates in states and metropolitan areas, and also source of income protection. And just a quick note about source of income or SOI laws. SOI laws make it illegal for landlords to deny renting a unit to anyone because of that person's legal source of income. Landlords still conduct screening and can still select tenants that meet that screening criteria. These laws are state and local. There is no federal requirement. A few states prohibit discrimination based on source of income, but do not include housing vouchers. And a few others have laws that preempt local governments from protecting housing voucher recipients. The task force also examined resources. These included things like whether the community had been featured in landlord participation research, local organizations and landlord resources and partners, and whether the community had HCV utilization programs. Other factors also included PHA usable issuance records and PHA lease-up success. Additionally, a quick note about the registration process. Registration was open to the public. We had a designated email address where anyone who was interested could submit comments and questions regardless of whether they attended a session in person. And we also collected written comments and questions at the listening forums. So here's a list of the locations where we held forums, and you'll see asterisks at Dallas, Fort Worth, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and also Salem. And this is where HUD also hosted focus group sessions. While some of you may have been at the meetings, I just want to briefly describe the general format of the sessions. Sessions were held at a variety of locations, landlord advocacy groups, HUD regional offices, and in one location we met at a public library. Meeting time was scheduled for 2 hours on weekdays, and in those locations where we had focus groups, they took place right after the forum for an additional hour. The meetings began with a brief presentation of some of the research that was covered earlier in this presentation. And while HUD and PHA staff were in attendance, the main purpose was to listen to what landlords had to say. Each session had a facilitator that led the discussion, and we also used an engagement application to kick off discussion on some of the topics. This app provided a way to poll the audience in real time for responses. So we asked a question on the overhead screen, and participants answered in their own words or selected an answer based on the type of poll that we set up. We will show some of these polls later on in the presentation so that you will get an opportunity to see what they looked like. These polls were very useful in starting discussion, but it should be noted that the amount of time spent discussing a particular topic did not always correlate to its relative position in the polls. So as we discuss each forum, we'll lead with some statistics on the housing market and some of the stakeholders, though not all of them, in that particular area. And just as a note, most of these numbers come from the most recent American Community Survey, or ACS. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into every statistic for each location. However, we will make the slides available after the webinar if you're interested in reviewing this information in more detail. And I also just want to note that during this section, we're providing you with an overview of what you heard in the listening forums, and the participant comments and information may not reflect current HUD policies, efforts, or priorities. So you can see in Washington, D.C. that there are SOI protections in place. So the D.C. Forum was the kickoff event. So it was not set up specifically to focus on landlord discussion and comment like the subsequent sessions. HUD's Office of Policy Development and Research, PD&R, hosts quarterly updates, and so this event took that same format. It hosted a HUD keynote speaker, provided an update on U.S. rental market conditions, and included a research presentation that was longer in D.C. than in the regional sessions. It also had a panel discussion and a Q&A session, and it was the only session that was broadcast via webinar and also recorded. So the panel in DC consisted of academics, a developer, and a director of HCVP at a PHA. And they discussed whether there is a difference in the perception versus the reality of the HCV program, expectations of PHAs in the HCV program, the need for trainings, accountability, and good communication. The biggest motivator to participate in the program, which is guaranteed rent. They discussed the PHA landlord relationships, that landlords felt that they needed additional support to be able to better participate in and be in compliance with the program. And then also on the inspections process, how to make it less intrusive and less bureaucratic. So the majority of the attendees in DC identified as property managers, and then there were also PHA staff and property owners in attendance. And almost all of the attendants currently had all the attendees currently had HCV tenants, and very few attendees had never participated in the program. And you'll see that in the subsequent sessions, there's a very similar mix between property managers and property owners, and almost all of the attendees had had some experience with the HCV program. So moving on to the next session, which was in Atlanta, and you can see Atlanta did not have SOI protection. So this session was held at the Atlanta Apartment Association. And as you can see, it's a very similar mix between property owners and managers. And here, almost 80% of the attendees currently had HCV tenants, and most of them did have experience at some point with the HCV program. And so this is a first example of one of the polls that we used during the sessions. We asked attendees, using one or two words, to tell us what they liked about the HCV program. This is an example of a poll where attendees could answer with any words they liked. And so by the size of the font, you can see that affordable, secure, and stability ranked at the top. And fewer attendees, but still more than one, listed money, tenants, long-term as options as reason that they liked participating in the program. So the next polls were both multiple choice, and attendees were able to select from answers that we had provided, and so able to select their top financial and their top bureaucratic reasons why they felt it was difficult to participate in the program. So as you can see, the top financial barrier here in blue was that voucher rents, payment standards were too low, the FMRs were too low. And you can also see in the top bureaucratic barrier that it was a tie between additional work required by inspection and lease-up, and also that the process was too time-consuming. And as it happens, the top financial barrier about payment standards was the top financial barrier in every forum except for one. So I'm not going to discuss it in this section, but later on when we talk about some takeaways. And again, for the top bureaucratic barrier, you will see those two answers come up again as well. So moving on to Dallas-Fort Worth, and Texas actually has a state preemption law that outlaws local SOI protection. And again, you can see a very similar breakdown in the attendees. And Dallas-Fort Worth was the first session with a focus group. And just a note about the focus groups, they were comprised of individuals who had attended the larger listening forum, and the focus groups just provided an opportunity to examine the topics and information discussed in the forum in a little bit greater detail. So moving on to the incentives poll from Dallas. According to the poll, participants said that their number one incentive for participating was rent and housing income, followed by payment and affordable housing. Moving on to the challenges, again, you can see that it was the payment standards was the top financial barrier, and then also the top bureaucratic barrier was that the process was too time-consuming. The next session we had in Los Angeles, and the state now has SOI protection, which includes HCV. And while we were in LA, there was a local measure that was on the ballot that impacted much of the discussion in Los Angeles. And this is an example of why HUD selected locations around the country so that they could hear about different policies, processes, and environments that were impacting landlord participation. And the LA Forum was held at the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. And you can see that similar in trends, the mix of attendees, and Los Angeles also had a focus group with 10 attendees. And here you can see, again, the top incentives for Los Angeles was housing provider and to learn. However, you can see in the poll that there's still a lot of the same themes that we've heard, the desire to end homelessness and the desire to help people as being some of the top incentives given by attendees in Los Angeles. The financial barriers, again, was the voucher payment standards, and Los Angeles actually did not end up using the bureaucratic barriers poll. The next session was held in Philadelphia. Philadelphia does have local SOI protection, which includes all public assistance. And this forum was held at the Philadelphia HUD Regional Office and was the highest in attendance with 88. It also had a focus group comprised of 15 participants. And in Philadelphia, the overwhelming majority of people said that their top incentive was guaranteed rent. And in Philadelphia, it was the only location where loss of income, rental income while waiting for inspections was the top financial barrier, and also that the additional work required by the inspections or lease-up process was the top bureaucratic barrier. But you can see that the voucher payment standards came in second, as did the process too time-consuming. So in Salem, Oregon, and it should be noted that Salem does have SOI protection, which includes HCVs. And this location was selected to draw landlords from across the state and trying to include some rural landlords as well. And this took place at the Salem Public Library. And here, everyone had identified as having experience with the HCV program at one time. And Salem also had a focus group, which was comprised of 10 participants. So the incentives here, you can see, was information, and they also wanted to fill vacancy. But you can also see that some Salem participants noted that it was the law, and that's why they participated in the program. The barriers, again, payment standards and the process too time-consuming. Next was in Salt Lake City, which also has SOI protection. And this meeting was held at the Association of Realtors and was second in attendance with 80. And here you can see for the incentives for Salt Lake City that the #1 reason for participation was that it was required. And additional incentives also include guaranteed rent and the desire to be able to gain occupancy for their units. And again, the barriers, similar to all the other sessions, or the same as all the other sessions, were the payment standards and the time-consuming process. So now I would like to talk about some of the takeaways that we compiled from all the listening sessions. So we'll begin by going over some of the top reasons for participating and then moving on to some of the challenges. So as we've seen from some of the polls, wanting to help people and receiving a stable, reliable source of income were the top reasons for participating. In fact, during the open discussion, participants at every session spoke about these two factors as being their primary reasons for participating as a landlord within the HCV program. And so this quote is a terrific example of what we heard repeatedly from landlords, that their involvement in the program was driven by both the desire to help people and pay it forward, and also by the promise of guaranteed rent. Some landlords talked about that they themselves or they had relatives who had been HCV tenants. They spoke about positive experience with HCV tenants, and one participant indicated that with proper screening, including the background checks and prior landlord interviews, that HCV tenants would stay for years and years. And this was also a way to improve their own financial lives. So at some of the regional sessions, participants also discussed that they were motivated to participate because of local requirements. So participants in Salem and Salt Lake City said that they were in the program because they were required by law. They felt they couldn't leave the program and still remain landlords. However, others did say that they treated all applicants the same, so the requirement did not really change their practice. And just as a note, landlords, again, in DC, Philadelphia, and now Los Angeles are also subject to similar laws. One of the other reasons that came up was guarantee programs. These are programs that make funds available to repair tenant-caused damages. These are available in some local markets and can reduce landlord concerns about being financially responsible for tenant-caused damages. These programs are typically established to accompany SOI legislation. And in both Salem and Salt Lake City have guarantee programs, and landlords expressed varying degrees of success with their ability to access these programs. So moving on to some of the landlord-identified challenges. You can see how some of the different forums voted. Los Angeles did not use this particular poll, so they are not included. But you can see that administrative and financial were the two top challenges, and we'll break these out a little bit in greater detail as we go forward. But just as a note, administrative includes bureaucratic concerns, things such as paperwork, the length of the process, confusion with the process, and communication with the PHA, and then financial challenges included payment standards, FMRs, damages, repairs, or inspections. And so this is a quote from a property owner in Philadelphia about not feeling supported or valued. And this was sort of an overarching theme that we heard repeatedly from landlords, which as we go through, we'll see has ties to other areas of concern voiced by landlords. So bureaucratic barriers. Breaking down some of the administrative challenges that we saw in the previous slide, some of the overall points that we've heard at the forums were that the process was too time consuming. So this ranked number 1 in bureaucratic barriers. Landlords stated that having to submit paperwork to PHAs through the mail, in person, wasted time and resources. And they also felt that not knowing the timeline, in addition to having a very long timelines, created frustration and financial loss. Attendees also discussed concerns over approved rental amounts, the length of time of their application approval and inspections, and really stated that HCV tenants might take months to move in. And then inspections, although landlords really did recognize the importance of inspections, they were frustrated when delays in the process caused slow move-in or abatement, which created a financial burden. So despite housing quality standards, landlords reported that inspections and required repairs could be inconsistent. And so these feelings are summed up in this quote from a property manager in Salt Lake City, expressing frustration with the inspections process and also the financial impact and just the overall process in general. And so as we saw above, the top landlord identified challenge was related to financial barriers. So at every forum, participants felt that the fair market rents didn't keep pace with market rents. Additionally, some landlords commented that the voucher amount approval and the appeal process were not transparent, so they didn't know when or if they would be approved, and they did not always understand why they were sometimes turned down. In markets with low vacancy, HCV holders are disadvantaged since landlords may fill units with market rate tenants before the unit is even vacated. And then again, second in the bureaucratic poll, we just saw here, and then here a second in the financial barriers was frustration with the inspections process. And so while they're second in these polls, the inspections process really was a large part of the discussion throughout each session. There was both concern over the loss of income while waiting for inspections and also concern over a lack of protection from tenant damages, especially when tenants did not have money for security deposits. And this created a financial risk. Landlords said they lacked a means of rent collection, ways of removing tenants, and they were also penalized for unexpected tenant damages. And so the next two sets of quotes sum up much of what we heard throughout the process. So this, a quote from Atlanta, Georgia, had to do a lot with the initial inspections and lease-up process. And here is a quote from Dallas, Fort Worth, talking about the frustration, again, with the inspections process, inspections not being uniform, the inspectors not being timely, and just a feeling that repairs were punitive or also trivial. So additionally, as part of the administrative challenges, there was a perception from landlords of a lack of support and communication. So a perception that both HUD and PHAs listened more to tenants than to landlords. So landlords felt that they had difficulty getting answers from PHAs, both that they felt people did not know the answers and also that they could not even get someone on the phone at times. So landlords really wanted to be seen as partners with PHAs, and this ties back to an overall feeling of not feeling supported or validated. So now I would like to turn things back over to Stephen Durham, who will discuss the virtual focus group. Stephen?
Thank you, Sarah. That's a thorough recap of the activities undertaken so far with the Landlord Task Force. As you can see, we had a wide variety of input. We reached out all over the country, and as a program that covers from sea to sea, from big city to small farm town, we see that the problems that the PHAs face and the landlords face tend to be the same. It's just a matter of scale. So the task force is now setting out in an effort to try to address some of those problems and put policies in place that'll make the experience better, not only for the landlord, also the tenant, and also have some administrative efficiencies for the PHAs. To ensure that we address the problems of the program correctly, we not only decided to hear from landlords, we thought it would be important to hear from the PHA perspective why they're having trouble with the landlord relationships, recruiting landlords, getting landlords to continue participating on the program. And so we reached out to the Public Housing Authorities Directors Association, commonly known as FHDA, for recommendations on PHAs with whom we should have a conversation with. So we convened a virtual focus group on October 25th, 2018, and we had 8 PHAs that we reached out to during that time. The 8 PHAs were located across the country, as we indicated. We had Massachusetts, Dedham, Massachusetts, Everett, Washington, Chester County, Pennsylvania, Salt Lake City, Utah, San Bernardino, California, Houston, Texas, and Sonoma County, California. These PHAs represent a wide breadth of styles of PHAs, some that serve rural communities, small communities, some that serve large urban cities, Houston being the 3rd largest city in America, Sonoma County being a predominantly rural coastal community, and also you have San Bernardino, which I believe is the largest land county in the United States. So we try to have a nice cross-section of PHAs. And what we did is during that focus group is we asked the PHAs to explain to us their relationships with their landlords and the problems that they're having and the things that they're doing to address those concerns. Dedham Housing Authority, which has 461 vouchers and is a high-performing agency, had extreme concerns about the fair market rents established for their areas. And so in an effort to assuage some of those landlords' concerns about low rents, Dedham did things such as direct deposits, making sure that landlords are going to get their money timely. They automated their inspection process. They also are looking to increase their payment standards so to help the PHAs be able to get units leased in the community. What they found in their local communities, because the rent for the fair market was so low in their estimation, that the landlords would simply charge a rent that was at a price point that the voucher holder could not actually access the unit. So what they're doing is looking into how they can increase the purchasing power of their vouchers by increasing their payment standards and doing some of the automated efficiencies to help with the relationship with landlords so that they could at least provide a convenient experience to the landlord if they couldn't provide them with additional dollars. The Everett Housing Authority in Washington is also a high performer and have just over 3,000 vouchers. And one of their main concerns for their landlords was the rent reasonableness process. They have a source of income law that's in the city now, so that requires the landlords to accept the vouchers and not discriminate against those that come to the door and look at the unit that are voucher holders. But with that comes the landlord says, we want to make sure that the PHA is paying the rent that we could be commanding on the private market. And so what they're doing is they're working with their smaller landlords and trying to encourage them to participate on the program, because they find that there's differences between working with the larger landlords and the smaller landlords. And we see that across the country, is that the larger landlords tend to have more resources and they have ability to absorb some of the pain points of the program a little easier than the mom and pop program that landlords on the program that we discussed earlier. And so Everett is trying to reach out to those smaller landlords, smaller mom and pop landlords, to ensure them that their program is going to be suitable for them, and that the tenants that are going to be coming with vouchers are going to be good tenants and tenants that remain in the unit for a longer period of time. The Housing Authority of Chester County, Pennsylvania is unique in its sense that it has determined that 95% of the landlords in the county, registered landlords in the county, do not participate in their program. So for a voucher program that has 1,674 vouchers, they're a high-performing program, but it's one of the wealthiest counties in the country. And so their concern is the lagging FMR. So when you're in the wealthiest county in the country, one of the wealthiest counties in the country, the rents are going to naturally be higher. So the FMRs lag behind where the natural market rate point is for rents. So the Housing Authority has moved towards what they call small area FMRs, which is another designation that allows a county like Chester to establish higher payment standards in the particular areas that helps their voucher holders actually access units and be able to rent units. And so that's what they're seeing, is they're seeing a benefit there. The greater the purchasing power, the more willing the landlord is to participate in the program. They've also hired at the Housing Authority a single point of contact for landlords, and that's another thing that PHAs are choosing to do, is to designate staff time specifically to landlords. As Sarah detailed earlier, a lot of the customer service and pain points that the landlords are experiencing have to do with the customer service or dealing with the PHA. So here's an example of a PHA that is dedicating its resources to trying to improve their relationship with the landlord, to focus on the landlord more specifically so that they can encourage them to participate in the program. Salt Lake City, a voucher program of 2,600, is also another high performer, but also is facing the challenge of extremely highly escalating rents in a short period of time. Now, with having a source of income protection in the state, landlords are recognizing that they're going to have to accept vouchers in a more competitive market. To help with that competition, the state has put together a damage fund, a tenant damage fund. So essentially, if a tenant leaves damages in the units, the landlord has the opportunity to request a payout from a damage fund set up by the state to offset the cost of repairing those damages left by the tenant. That provides a source of comfort to landlords that are out there, knowing that that's available to them. They don't feel like they get left holding the bag should a tenancy end on poor terms, or should a tenancy end with a significant amount of damage to their unit. The landlords now know that they have the ability to go to the state, access the damage mitigation fund, and then make the repairs to the units. This PHA has also dedicated 3 staff people to be points of contact specifically for landlords, once again showing the importance of the landlord, their importance to the program, by making sure that they have access to the PHA staff at all times to have their questions answered, and to make sure that the landlords feel like they're a valued partner. At the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that everybody has a role. Well, everybody's role has to be to value the other person's role as well. And if that level of respect and value is given, then the program tends to work in a smoother running fashion. So PHAs such as Salt Lake City have recognized that and dedicated more resources than other PHAs towards addressing their landlords so that the landlords feel like they're a valued partner. Housing Authority County of San Bernardino, which I mentioned is probably one of the largest land counties in the United States, has 9,500 vouchers. They're also a high performer. They're a participant in the Moving to Work program, as it's a subsection of the Housing Choice Voucher program that allows the Housing Authority to have some flexibilities in what they do with their money. It allows for some unique opportunities and some creative programming. But what they're finding in their area is that even though it's an extremely large county, that there's a low amount of rental inventory. And now they have new market analysis that has divided the county into 9 different areas. And by doing so, they're able to establish different payment standards in those areas that are better suited to use the voucher. When you're a county of such size, a payment standard may not be sufficient in the east side of the county, for example, and it may work in the west side of the county. So by breaking it up into 9 different areas, they were able to set payment standards where the vouchers would be utilized in all parts of the county. So ensuring that their voucher holders have the purchasing power necessary to rent units at the market rate throughout the county. The landlords found that to be a positive of the housing authority. And they also understand that working with landlords and being a good partner is important, because without that relationship, the landlords tend to not want to do business. And they also take an opportunity throughout the year. They send out staff to various community events and real estate industry events where they get to actually sell the program and discuss the program. A big part of what we do and we encourage our PHAs to do is myth busting, is to get out there and to sell the positive aspects of the program, and to encourage landlords to have an open mind and to look at the program for what it really is and not for the things that they may have heard about it. So they look at every opportunity as to educate people, and they also use that education, that opportunity, when they're inspecting their units. One of the responsibilities of the program is that the PHA will inspect your unit either annually or biannually, and at that opportunity, the housing authority is taking their opportunity to educate landlords on new things, new changes to the programs, new payment standards, relaxed regulations, so that the landlord understands that the program is working to make that experience better. So actively campaigning and actively educating the program is a big part of what San Bernardino is doing. The Houston Housing Authority, 16,000 vouchers, one of our larger programs, is also a high performer. They have a 9% vacancy rate. So with the 9% vacancy rate, you would assume that the vouchers are being accepted on a more rapid basis, but that's not necessarily the case. What happens with them is that their FMRs, fair market rents, are lagging behind what they believe are the open markets in some of the small area FMRs, as we talked about earlier, which are designed to increase purchasing power in specific areas of certain cities. They find that their FMR is lagging behind that. So without having the purchasing power, they're not able to access that 9% vacancy rate as actively as they would like to. Also, another problem that the housing authority has to battle is that in the state of Texas, your source of income can be held against you. You don't have to accept the voucher. And so that's something that they have to actively combat. But one thing that they consistently tell us is that they have great landlords on their program, and that there aren't many bad tenants, and that in their estimation, bad tenants generally have bad landlords. And that's because the landlord's not enforcing the tenant or enforcing the lease and allowing the tenant's behavior to get out of control and causing there to be a rift in that relationship and a violation of the lease. And so they are aggressively teaching and educating their landlords on the benefits of enforcing their lease. They've also implemented what is called a mobility program. And that mobility program helps low-income people access areas that are determined to be areas of high opportunity, meaning access to better schools, transportation, work, also maybe parks, shopping, daycare, things like that. And so they are actively helping people that don't have the means at the surface level to access these neighborhoods. So they're actively trying to, use their vouchers throughout all of Houston. One of the things that they've also done that's been very successful is that they've created a call center that's available 24/7. So that's available not only to their landlords, but it's also available to their tenants. And they work on landlord-tenant disputes at that call center. They've also opened up their lobby, and they have set it up so that there is a resource center within their lobby for their clients and landlords alike. And that resources don't just pertain to housing, they also pertain to education, computer availability, so on and so forth. So they're making their housing authority a place that is of a benefit to the entire community, hoping that landlords will see that, we're not only are we providing housing, we're trying to improve lives, and that the landlord is an active part in that exercise as well. And the last group that participated was Sonoma County Housing Authority, which is an area of California that has coastal land, but also has areas that were struck and devastated by the wildfires that often hit California. And as a result, their housing stock has diminished tremendously. And so that leaves a very tight market, and when there's tight markets, the rents increase. As a result, the landlords complain that the FMR is too low to access their units, even if those units are in rural areas. And so what they're doing is they're looking into providing vacancy protections and access to mediation for landlords to help landlords incentivize landlords to keep their units on the program. They also hired a housing locator, and that housing locator actually works with the tenant, not the landlord, but that housing locator works with the tenant to find and connect them with landlords and partner them up so that they have good tenants with good landlords. And these are just some of the examples of that we came across in this focus group. We also had PHAs that indicated that they put together a landlord-tenant dispute resolution board where they were working through problems with landlords and tenants and helping to prevent evictions. We had people that have housing locators that essentially spend their entire day courting landlords, cold calling landlords, calling business entities that have a significant amount of units in their portfolio, and basically asking them to make their units available to their voucher holders. So there are numerous housing authorities that are out there that are actively campaigning and actively recruiting landlords. This is just an example of some of those PHAs that we reached out to so that we could get their side of the story and what they're doing to actively engage you guys and to recruit your participation. And we will continue doing so throughout the process. And at this time, I am going to turn it back over to Leah Anderson so that she could talk about future actions that the Landlord Task Force will be taking.
Great. Thanks, Stephen, and thanks everybody for sticking with us. I know it's a lot of information, so just know that you can come back and review the recording whenever you need to on our website. So just to kind of wrap us up, some of the recommendations, the broad categories of recommendations that the task force presented to Secretary Carson and that we're now pursuing actions under include developing a range of materials that are relevant for landlords, so speaking more to the perspective of the landlords, the challenges that the landlords experience, and things like that. Right now, a lot of our materials are either for HUD, PHAs, or tenants, so trying to fill that gap. Working to streamline some of those processes that landlords find burdensome, that you find burdensome, including inspections. And facilitating information and best practice sharing across PHAs. So Stephen was just talking about some of the PHAs that we've spoken to. We've engaged with a number of other landlords as well to learn about what they're doing, and so now we're working towards figuring out how we can share that information with PHAs across the country so you all can share and learn from each other. And then providing opportunities for landlords and HUD and PHAs to connect. So having that opportunity, that FaceTime, time to ask questions, get clarification, and understand what's coming next. So this is kind of a continuation of that last slide. So one of the things we've recently published is the HCV Landlord Resources webpage. The link is at the bottom. It's very long. We will send all registered participants a follow-up email with that link, so you don't have to type it into your web browser. You can also find it by just navigating to the HCV website on HUD.gov, and then it pops up under like new things or highlights at the top of the page. So that's exciting, and that's where a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is housed and or linked. So it's definitely a good place to start. I just mentioned the program materials for landlords that we're working on developing. Those will be available on that website. Another thing we just started doing, which I think is really exciting, is we're hosting symposiums around the country with landlords. And these are they're similar, but they're different than our 2018 listening forums. The focus of those listening forums was really hearing from landlords about the challenges they experience, how they impact their business, how they impact their life. And now the landlord symposiums are taking a different direction, and they're focusing on providing basic information for prospective landlords or maybe new landlords on the program, providing a snapshot of what the voucher program looks like in that local area, who are the basic participants, how many PHAs are there, things like that. And then we're also bringing in some local professionals that might have something interesting for landlords to hear about, such as landlord-tenant law in that particular area. So our next symposium is going to be in Denver on March 25th. That's a Wednesday. Registration just went live yesterday, and you can find the link to that registration at that handy website at the bottom. If you're in the Denver, Colorado area, we would love to have you. And then we haven't announced our locations for the rest of this fiscal year, so stay tuned. Something else coming this year is we're working on a landlord strategy guide for PHAs. So this is that, what are PHAs doing across the country to work with landlords and build better relationships with landlords. And so we're creating a guidebook that will walk through different things that PHAs are doing, how they decided that that was a good thing for them to implement, whether it's been successful, kind of like a how-to guide. And we are talking with a range of PHAs for that in terms of size and location, all non-MTW PHAs at this point. So that's really exciting. We're hoping to roll that out chapter by chapter, starting pretty soon, and hopefully all of it available by this summer. Related to inspections, we are coordinating with REAC on the next phase of their work, which is Inspire V. So stay tuned for more on that. We want to make sure that your perspective as a property owner, a property manager, is taken into account as REAC transitions into this new phase. And then the last thing, so this was the first webinar in our series. It was really meant to provide you with a nice background on the challenges that we've heard about and that are influencing the work that we're now doing. So we really wanted to set the stage with this first webinar, and the second and third webinars will talk about the things that are above that in this nice bulleted list. So stay tuned for that. I think they'll be really interesting, and hopefully we will be able to do them live and get questions from you. So with that, in case anybody did email any questions in, we'll take those now. And just a note really quickly, if you do have a question after watching this, because we weren't able to host it live, so if you're watching it at a later time and you have a question, there are 2 email addresses you can send questions to, and we will get you a response. So one of them is on that nifty webpage, the HCV Landlord webpage. It's landlordtaskforce@hud.gov. And then the other one is hcv@firstspic.org, and that's what you've been using to register for this webinar. So we really, really apologize about not being able to host this live. We were all very excited to have this opportunity to answer your questions. So we will get you some answers if you send us your questions.
Okay, we did get several questions in, just general questions about the Landlord Task Force work. The first question is, from a landlord's perspective, they said that they don't hear as much from the PHAs as they'd like to when they reach out to them. Is there anything in HUD strategies that will address communication between PHAs and landlords?
Well, I think that's always going to be an effort that we're going to try to promote with our PHAs, is to improve that communication. We are trying to get increased administrative fees to allow PHAs to engage in automation and hire new staff, which will allow for better communication amongst landlords and PHAs. But that is something that we will always try to champion, because we recognize that the communication is key to the success of the program. Unfortunately, we can't mandate communication protocols. That's at the local PHA level on how they go about being responsive to emails and phone calls. But HUD will continue to advocate on behalf of the participants of programs and beneficiaries to encourage our PHAs to have a better open lines of communication.
We have another question, which is from the PHA perspective. how do PHAs pay for things like landlord incentives and security deposits with the current admin fee level? I think this is particularly for non-MTW PHAs.
I'm going to back up really quick and keep answering the first question, and then we'll go to that one. So to continue on the first question, the strategy guide that will be coming out this year does have a lot of information on improving communications between landlords and PHAs, so including like when a newsletter might be successful, when a listserv to your current participating landlords might be successful, which landlord portals, so a lot of PHAs currently use portals, which portals PHAs seem to be having success with, and which features within those portals the landlords really like. Some PHAs are having landlord advisory boards to make sure that they're getting the landlord perspective on some of the work that they're doing. They're doing like outreach events. They're doing fun events like dinners and happy hours. Not saying that that's feasible for everybody, but there's a range of things that PHAs are doing to improve communication and relationships. And you're going to hear a lot about that in the subsequent webinars, and then you can read about it in the strategy guide that will be coming out. And then going to the admin fee question. Do you want to touch on that, Stephen?
So PHAs will fund these additional services or admin fee through their admin fee reserve accounts. And the PHA is able to build an admin fee reserve by doing things that promote efficiencies within their administrative process. And so once the reserve fee is ample enough, then they have the ability to try to offset some of these costs, such as security deposit assistance or landlord mitigation funds. They also try to partner with whether it be the state or local government agencies to try to access some additional funding for these purposes. The housing authorities have to have some ingenuity and on their own and how they create different revenue streams to make these types of opportunities available. And we encourage that kind of entrepreneurial spirit amongst our PHAs to try to figure out how they can, best serve their local communities and the resources that are necessary to carry out some of the things that they wish to do. So, but essentially they will have to fund them through their own administrative fees.
One additional question. What are some ways landlords can make Section 8 participants know that their units are available to families in the HCV program?
Well, they can list their units on sites such as Go Section 8, or they can make their units available at the local PHA administrative office. They can go there and leave some information, probably at the front desk. You can post online on Craigslist and websites or things of that nature. Sometimes I've seen landlords that will stand out in front of the housing authority and they will court tenants as they come in and out of the building. So I think it's the same ways that they would promote their unit on the private market. It's no different. Our tenants are looking in the same places, whether it be the classified ads or the online resources that are available. We want our landlords to understand that a Section 8 tenant is no different than a private market tenant. They're seeking housing the same way that a private market tenant is as well. They just happen to have somebody that is going to subsidize the rent on their behalf, but that doesn't change their quest or their ability to secure housing for themselves.
Okay, thanks. That's all the questions for now.
Great. So if you have another question, again, you can email it to one of those two email addresses, and we will get you a response. So I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.